Hey guys, and welcome back. So, we've done videos on exceptions under IPC. We've done video on unsoundness of mind, and we have recently done video on mistake of fact and mistake of law under IPC. All three of these topics fall under general exceptions of IPC. We've done videos on them. I will link them on the screen if you have not seen them. We have been getting many more requests to cover exceptions, so we will continue in the same line and we'll do more exceptions. And today we will be dealing with accident and necessity as exceptions under Indian Penal Code. So that falls under section 80 and 81 respectively of the IPC. Let's take a look at section 80 of the IPC. And it says accidents in doing a lawful act. The section says nothing is an offense which is done by accident or misfortune and without any criminal intention or knowledge. In doing of a lawful act in a lawful manner by lawful means and with proper care and caution. So it's basically saying that any act which otherwise would have been an offense is not going to be an offense, will not be punishable if it was an accident. And how do you know it was an accident? You see whether there was any intention, criminal intention, or there was any knowledge. If there were none, there was no criminal intention, there was no knowledge, and it was done in the ordinary course of things, it just happened out of misfortune that you ended up doing something which otherwise would have been an offense. In such a case, you get an exception and you will not be punished under IPC because it falls under an exception. So the important thing for you to remember here is that it happens out of ordinary course of things. For example, let's take a look at the illustration under section 80. It says that A is at work with a hatchet. Hatchet is a kind of an axe. So he is A, this person A is at work with a hatchet. The head flies off and kills a man who is standing by. Here, if there was no want of proper caution on the part of A, his act is excusable, not an offense. So he was just going about his day, doing a lawful act in a lawful manner in ordinary course of things. He did not know this man A. He did not have criminal intention to kill him. He did not have knowledge. And it just so happened that out of misfortune, the head of the hatchet flies off and kills this man. So it is an accident and he will not be charged with culpable homicide or murder. It is important to know that this act that this person is doing during which the accident happens, this act this A was doing or anybody is doing, this act has to be lawful. So the person should not be committing an offense, and while committing an offense an accident happens, then that will not fall under section 80 because the act was not a lawful act. The act also has to be done in a lawful manner and by lawful means and with proper care and caution. So this person A should take proper care and caution that the hatchet is perfect, the hatchet is not broken, the axe is not broken. If he knew that the head of the axe is broken and it keeps flying off, and in spite of that he keeps using it and a person dies, then he has not taken proper care and caution. So if he's taken proper care, caution, doing a normal act, lawful manner, lawful means, without any criminal intention, no knowledge, and in that act something happens which otherwise would be an offense, in such a case it will fall under exception of mistake. So it is not done willfully or negligently. It is done after due care and caution. Now that is mistake under IPC. Let's take a look at the exception of necessity under IPC now, which is given in section 81. Section 81 says that act likely to cause harm but done without criminal intent and to prevent other harm. So the section reads, nothing is an offense merely by reason of its being done with the knowledge that it's likely to cause harm, if it is done without criminal intention to cause harm, and in good faith for preventing or avoiding other harm to person or property. And then the explanation says it's a question of fact. In such a case, whether the harm to be prevented or avoided was of such a nature and so imminent as to justify the excuse, the risk of doing the act with the knowledge that it was likely to cause harm. Don't worry, I'm going to explain it. It was just a reading. So section 81 says a person causes a harm knowing that it is going to cause harm, but without criminal intention to prevent a bigger harm from happening. In such a case, if he causes a small harm to prevent a bigger harm from happening, he knows this is going to cause a small harm. There is knowledge, but there is no criminal intention. You can read in the section, there is knowledge that it is likely to cause harm, but it is done without any criminal intention to cause harm. This person knows that it will cause a small harm, but he has to do it to prevent a bigger harm from happening. In such a case, it is not an offense. The small harm that he causes will not be an offense. He will not be punished. And the important thing is that he should have done it with good faith, knowing that I'm causing this small harm, but it is to prevent a much bigger harm from happening. There should be good faith, and good faith is defined in section 52 of the IPC, and it says nothing is said to be done or believed in good faith which is done or believed without due care and attention. The operative part of section 52 is due care and attention. So when we say that this person should have good faith, we are saying that this person should have applied mind and should have seen that there is due care and attention, and he has come to a deliberate decision that I have to do this small harm to prevent a much bigger harm from happening. Let's see this with the example, the illustration which is given, and then it might be easier for us to understand. So the illustration under section 81 says, A. The captain of a steam vessel suddenly and without any fault or negligence on his part finds himself in such a position that before he stops his vessel, he must inevitably run down to boat B with 20 or 30 passengers on board, unless he changes his course of vessel, and that by changing his course, he must incur the risk of running down a boat C with only 2 passengers on board, which he may possibly clear. Here, if A alters his course without any intention to run down boat C and in good faith for the purpose of avoiding the danger to the passengers in boat B, he is not guilty of an offence, though he may run down the boat C by doing an act which he knew was likely to cause that effect. It is to be found as a matter of fact that the danger which he intended to avoid was such as to excuse him in incurring the risk of running down boat C. So, in this case, there is a steam vessel, there is a captain. He sees that he is going to run into a boat B, and this boat B has 20 to 30 passengers. He sees nothing doing. I have to change the course of my ship so I don't run down and crash into this boat B. And on the other hand, if he changes course, there is a possibility that he will run into boat C. And this boat C only has 2 passengers. And there is also a possibility that he might not even hurt them. He has no intention to hurt passengers in boat C, but he has knowledge that if he doesn't change his course, then 30 passengers in boat B will die. So without any intention to kill the passengers in boat C, he says that this is a smaller harm and I have to prevent a bigger harm from happening. I have to save the 30 passengers on boat B, and he changes course, and in that, if he ends up hitting boat C, but there is proof that he had good faith, he had reason to believe that he will end up causing a much bigger harm, and there was an excuse for him to incurring this risk of running down. There was a risk that if he turns the other side, he might run into boat C or he might not. And if it is found that in good faith he believed that there is an excuse for incurring this risk, then it will not be an offense. The other illustration says that A in a great fire pulls down houses in order to prevent the conflagration from spreading. In the second illustration, a person pulls down a house in order to prevent the fire from spreading to other houses which are adjacent to this burning house. So, he pulls down this house, but he has good intention. He has knowledge that yes, it will cause a harm, but it will be a smaller harm as compared to a much bigger harm. If the fire spreads throughout all the houses, it will be much bigger harm. So he says, let me just pull this house down. So it will be a harm, but it will prevent a bigger harm from happening. In this case, his act of pulling down the house, if there is good faith, there is knowledge, but there is no criminal intention. In such a case, his act would not be an offense. that is section 81 of the IPC. So you can see here that there is no criminal intention, but the person knows. There is deliberate thinking. The person understands the risks. That it is a reasoned decision that, okay, I have two options. If I do this option, I will prevent a much bigger harm from happening, yet I will cause a small harm, and I'm going to do this. There has to be deliberate reasoning. It has to be a thought out decision, and then this person takes the decision, causes a small harm. In such a case, it is not an offense. And if you see the differences between section 80 and 81, in 80 there is neither criminal intention nor knowledge. The axe just flew off, the head just flew off from the axe. There was neither intention nor knowledge, the person had not thought out. But in section 81, there is knowledge that yes, a small harm might happen, but there is no criminal intention to cause harm. It is done to prevent a bigger harm from happening. And good faith has to be seen, which is due care and caution. The important thing to remember is that in section 81, you can do a small harm to prevent a bigger harm from happening, but you can't do a crime. So it cannot be an excuse to do a crime. It can't be an excuse to do a crime or to justify a crime or to do something that benefits you. And you just cover it up, mask it up by saying, I was trying to prevent a harm. So what if it did benefit for me, but I was trying to prevent a harm? You cannot do that. The example for that are two cases. Let's just look at those. Dudley versus Stephens, 1884. In this case, the crew of a yacht was cast away in a storm. So this yacht was stranded. It was in sea, there was no food. The crew was stranded. So two people, Dudley and Stephen, what they decided was to kill the cabin boy and eat his flesh on the 20th day. On being rescued, they were found guilty of murder and they were not given the exception. The court said, this is not fair. You can't say that we have committed a crime for our benefit to avoid a greater harm. You can't say that we killing the cabin boy was necessity. So you can't commit a crime for self-serving purposes and then ask for an exception under section 81. Similarly was the case of United States versus Holmes, 1842. In this, an American vessel was about to drown, and in order to save it, the accused threw aboard 16 passengers. So what the accused did was he took up 16 passengers and he threw them in the water, down from the vessel, down from the ship, the boat they were in. He said he did it to prevent the ship from sinking. Had he not thrown these 16 passengers, the ship would have sunk. He was convicted of manslaughter, and the court held that necessity does not justify indiscriminate throwing of passengers overboard to save the sinking ship. So it was benefiting him, and he committed a crime. There was no reason to incur this risk. He could not justify a crime of throwing passengers indiscriminately and killing them for an exception under section 81. So if you get a question in mains or PT, you have to see whether there was good faith. You have to see that this thing was done not to cover up a crime. It was not for a self-benefiting purpose. So it will depend a lot on the facts of the cases. You have to see and apply your mind and give a well thought out, logical, reasoned decision. So that's about mistaken necessity under IPC. Make sure you hit the subscribe button so you get notified of new videos.